Hello. It says we're live. The only way we'll know if we're actually live is if someone can actually type in the chat box on the right-hand side saying that you can hear us and that you can see us. That would be great. And we will get started in about 4 minutes. But if there are any viewers watching us right now, if you could just let us know on the chat box on the right-hand side that you can see and hear us, that would be perfect. Thank you. Yep. Tara says hello. Good morning, Tara. Loud and clear. Hopefully not too loud, but perfect.
Lisa,
some people are in Google Hangouts.
Okay, good to know. Maybe I can send a quick message. It's the YouTube Live link in the calendar that we're looking to get into.
Oh, perfect. There's more on.
Yay. So I'm just going to go on to the Google Hangouts for a quick second and tell them to get off. Good morning, everyone. If you are currently seeing me on the Google Hangout, what you need to do is you actually need to go to the YouTube Live link. So it's not through Google Hangouts, it's actually through YouTube Live. So just go back into the calendar event and it should say link to webinar in blue, and then you can hop on with us on there. See you soon. Bye. We have lots of people.
Oh,
good morning. Look at
Good
everybody.
morning.
This is so exciting.
Oh, look, Lisa, you guys look great. Thanks, Lisa.
Audra, if you are listening, would you mind hopping onto the Google Hangout? And if anybody is on there, do you mind redirecting them to the YouTube Live link? You're the best. Thank you.
Yep. She's on.
Lots of good mornings. I love it.
We're going to get started in about 1 minute. Good morning, St. Isabel. We have a whole school. That's exciting.
Fun.
No pressure, just an entire elementary school. Awesome. Holy Spirit is there as well. Good morning. Good morning.
There's Jody. Good morning, Jody. Sorry, I have to squint to see
No
the
pressure.
chat.
No pressure.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
Good morning, staff. All right, so it is 7:45 on the dot, and we are aware of everybody's precious time that they're dedicating to this, so we're going to get started. Thank you for being here. We're really just happy that you've joined us this morning for our first online webinar for our Third Path Book Club. There are a few ways that you can engage with us today. The first is that you can just watch us. We're hopefully going to be entertaining, maybe not. The second way is just following along with your book. We also have a Google slide deck that's located in the Google Calendar invite, so you can follow along that way. And the other way is you can just listen to us and multitask. So lots of student choice in there for you to participate along with us. The second way that you can participate is through the chat on the right-hand side. So we can already see some of you saying some really nice, encouraging messages for us who are very nervous sitting here. So if you have any questions throughout, we highly encourage you to write them down. And if I see them in time, I'm going to sort of be able to moderate that and ask them the questions, and they can hopefully have some insightful answers to share with all of you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce these two ladies to my left. This is Carrie Nolan, an amazing teacher from St. Mark's who has read The Third Path and who's done some pretty exciting things in her high school. So she's here to share her experience. And we have Leanne Stanton over here. She is part of the social emotional learning team, and we're really excited. And then off screen, we have two lovely ladies. We have Elizabeth Paquette, who is our mental health lead. And we also have Lise Riberdy, who is also part of the social emotional team. And they're here to give us the hook at 8:15. So without further ado, ladies, go for it.
So good morning. Thank you, Catherine, who has been my partner in crime trying to set this up. And it's new for us. And yeah, we were a little nervous. Both of us, I think we're up at 4, but that's okay. We're here. We're live, so it's great. So I really encourage you to add comments in the chat. If there's something that really resonated with you, if you have questions, please add them in. And then Catherine will moderate for us. So she'll jump in and let us know what you're saying. Otherwise, I have to squint to try to read all those messages. So as Catherine said, I put together a little slide deck for those of you who like to have slides to follow along with. So I'll refer to those, but you don't need to have it open if you don't want to, if you're just still doing your hair and listening to us this morning. So I wanted to say a big thank you for joining us. I know it's a big commitment to read a book and to be online at 7:45 a.m. So
yes.
Thank you. That's really great. So we're just going to go through some of the first parts of the book and some of the reasons why these 3 authors came together to write. And so as we're chatting this morning, please jump in, add your own comments, because we are really curious to know what you think too. So what's really great about this book is that these authors are fairly local. They're from Thunder Bay. And so 3 authors that have come together, and the main author that we have seen is Dr. Tranter, and he's very open with his work. He shares a lot of things with us, which is really great. So it's nice to know that we're dealing with authors that are close to home. So if you hopefully read chapter 1 and 2, in chapter 1, they really do a great job at laying the groundwork. And if you check out my slide deck from slide 4 to 7, it's sort of like a really good summary of why he wrote the book and what brought them to this idea of the third path. So we often talk about, and just looking at page 5 and 6, one of the challenges, the first challenge that we think about is that students are really coming to us with backpacks full, talk about their emotional backpack or challenges. And so one of the first challenges they outline is that students are struggling more than ever with mental health difficulties. And the numbers show us that, the statistics, and also on the bottom of page 5, that students are at risk, whether it be learning challenges, things happening at home, inside of school and outside of school. I don't know if, Carrie, you have anything to add from the high school perspective there?
From the high school perspective, I work as student success. I work in the Achievement Center. So what the traditional Achievement Center looked like 20 years ago would have been more a behavior model, and would have been more just getting kids back up on credits or doing the alternative learning. Now it's more the mental health needs and supporting students. Maybe they didn't get credits. Maybe they just can't function sometimes in a regular classroom, but the majority of our clientele now and the students that we're trying to support, there's more needs of supporting their mental wellness. And it's a daily, not struggle, but daily occurrence that we are trying to support. So we notice that we need more support, and we need to support as a team together of how do we keep these kids in school? How do we keep them wanting to be in school?
And I think a lot of people would agree that this is something that we're all thinking about. And that's why this is a really great read for us to start to understand some of these things and how we can best support students on their journey.
And just sort of to touch in there, Allison brought up a good point, how it's flipping the definition of teaching, right? And what does that teaching really look like? Yeah. So good point, Allison.
Thank you, Allison. So I really love how on the bottom of page 6, the authors really bring our attention to how school is really a powerfully influential force in the lives of young people. They spend, a good amount of their day with us, and it's a protective environment. And also it can be transformative for students. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that, but that it's really an important place for students to be. So as we sort of move through chapter 1, they talk a lot about well-being and that definition of well-being. And they have some really good questions on chapter 8. You know, what is well-being even? That definition of well-being. What does it look like in a school setting? How does well-being connect to academic achievement? How do educators promote well-being? And so it's a really complex idea. You know, how do we know what well-being is? How do we nurture that in our students? And I think it's almost an uncomfortable place for some educators to think about, okay, how do we deal with all of these needs, and how do we move our kids forward, especially the ones that are in a really vulnerable place?
And a lot of teachers for the idea that you have the 20 to 30 to 34 kids in a class, and maybe one is really struggling. And how are you as that educator meant to try and deal with their needs in that moment, in that time?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we start to realize that our reaction and our reaction to our student is really important. This is why that book kind of grounds us a bit more.
Yeah. And there were 2 points that Rolla and Kim LaSalle also brought up. So Kim was talking about how rethinking the definition of curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rolla, and I think this dovetails very well, is the human aspect of learning. So redefining those kinds of things and, you know, what they actually mean for us as educators in the classroom.
Yeah, like it's no longer classroom management like back in the day. You would get that classroom management and how to deal with the whole class. Now it's not a classroom management model. It's a relationship building, relationship sustaining model.
That's a very well said statement. Yeah.
So if you're following along on the slide deck, that sort of brings us to challenge 2, the point that educators are overloaded and stressed. They struggle to effectively deliver current curriculum. They struggle to deal successfully with constant behavioral challenges in the classroom. So the authors really acknowledge that fact that educators are stressed, they're overloaded. And so throughout the book, they'll be focused on not only our students, but on ourselves, which actually marries really well with that whole idea of be well. If we're not well, then it's difficult to help our students along the journey as well. Challenge 3 is really closely connected to that whole idea of initiative-itis. So we have so many things coming at us. We're trying to do all these really cool things like webinars at 7:45 in the morning. But that we've had so many things, and it says the initiatives in education are important and well-intentioned, yet many fail to be successfully implemented in a meaningful and sustainable way. So I love that when the authors talk about why they came up with a third path, that they're really acknowledging some of the challenges that educators are having as well. So that brings us to looking at the 2 paths, and these 2 paths that we sort of grew up with and that we can relate to, thinking about the academic path and then thinking about that path of well-being, which I think a lot of us didn't really experience growing up. I don't really remember lessons about stress or how are we talking about feelings. I'm not sure.
I think I don't remember specific lessons, but you remember how you felt with the teacher you trusted at the end, which I feel like where we're talking about the third path eventually, then we get it and you get that well-being part, but it wasn't overt at the time.
Yeah. Well, it's, that saying, you don't remember the teacher that taught you long division. You remember the teacher that made you feel good, right? Or made you feel safe and okay. So it just brings it back to what really is the curriculum. And Jody was talking about how when we're relooking at the curriculum, it's not to be seen as sort of an extra, but that we have to figure out what it really should be in the first place and not that it's this added.
And if you read some of the little pieces about, the academic pathway, so that, if we followed along that highly academic pathway and we were successful and got a good job, that didn't necessarily equate to that idea of feeling well-rounded and that ideal well-being. So that success doesn't necessarily equate well-being. So, and it says here on the bottom of page 12, the problem is that well-being is not like math or reading. It can be different for each student and is not something that can be learned directly. So part of the challenge or the problem of well-being, as the authors define it, is that well-being continues to be misunderstood and misapplied in education. So when we talk about that path of well-being, it's really difficult to understand it and to figure out how it really fits in with academics. And so that's why taking this journey through the third path helps us to understand, okay, how can we really do that? I think most educators understand that idea of developing the whole child, but still there's a lot of misconceptions and what does that actually look like, especially because it's different for each child.
Yeah, and at the high school level, there seems to be sometimes that resistance of it's not in my department, or it's not in my particular curriculum, or it should fit in the religion class natural. And I get there's some natural fits in some humanities courses. However, a teacher's strategies and a teacher's intentionality is for whatever, doesn't matter the course. It's however they build that in, which this book brings back to. It's somebody else's issue or they're somebody else's kids. I just teach the curriculum. It's no longer just teaching the curriculum. It's working with students.
Right. And to your point at the beginning, it's all about the team, right? Yeah. It's a team approach,
yeah.
right? It can't just be the religion teacher in the school.
No.
It can't just be like that one teacher that teaches the kid in the classroom. It's a team approach,
yeah.
right? Like when the student transitions to the yard, I'm coming from elementary, but when they transition to the yard or they go into the gym class or they're in the office with the OA, everybody needs to have that same sort of definition of what well-being is and sort of how to approach it.
And I think if we look at page 13 and 14, some of those things, Carrie, that you brought up, the idea of, it's not part of my subject area, or I've taught a certain amount of lessons about stress or whatever it is. So I've checked it off, I've done it. But it acknowledges too that we're all on wherever we are on the path, and that's okay. And to acknowledge some of these things and to think and speak professionally about, okay, well, how do we bring it into our classroom? How do we promote that idea of educating the whole child? And I think that since we're all here, we're all invested, and that it's really positive. It's really great. So I like on the bottom of page 14, how they say that a focus solely on academic achievement, while valuable, will not likely garner the comprehensive benefits that educators were led to believe would result. So we know that this third path is important. And so the end of chapter 1 brings us to that complementary pursuit where we unite both achievement and well-being into one comprehensive yet complementary pursuit.
Which is kind of why it's nice to say that we teach in the Catholic School Board, because we have been talking about the whole child. We have been talking about bringing in the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. And we're able to talk about that a little bit more overtly in the last number of years, but bringing this book it's complementary to everything that we are trying as a board, which is nice.
And so if you take a look on slide 10, and a lot of my slides come from Dr. Tranter, so he's very nice to share with us, that well-being can really be embedded in everything that schools do. So that's really what the third path is all about. I included in the slide deck a video that they've put together as well. So if you have a chance to watch it, and every time we see that video, you'll see on page 17 the U-curve of adult psychological well-being. There's always snickers in the room when we see that U-curve, especially, and if you fit into the bottom of the U-curve, and how the authors describe that it's only sort of later on in life that we realize, he talks about what's most important and we're not running on that treadmill of life. So if you have a chance to watch the little introductory video, it's really great. So moving into that idea of well-being, and the authors go through a lot of really good learning around well-being. And you can see on page 19 and 20, the chart that has, they've done a great deal of research with model names, prominent models of well-being in their description. But on page 20, there's a really great summary of well-being. And I just highlighted some key ideas here that well-being is complex, it's dynamic. Well-being has a subjective component. So I really like that summary that brings us to a bit of an understanding of, okay, well, what is well-being exactly, and what is it that we're trying to focus on? Any thoughts coming at us, Catherine? I see the screen.
There are lots of thoughts.
lighting.
Lots of thoughts. Amy was talking about the cell is so important to include. She actually just started a community circle and felt almost guilty for taking that time away from the curriculum, but the impact has been tremendous. And that's a really good point, right? We want to try and break that myth that it's an added something to the curriculum, right? We're trying to sort of bring that understanding together that it is your curriculum. So that's amazing that you're doing those community circles and that just sort of making sure that we, mesh the two so that it's not an added thing that we have to do, because then the teacher stress is real.
Yeah. How I got this book was from Debbie Frendo from my boss for student success, and she'd been gracious enough to lend it out and give us all the resource packs that we can look at, and literally sat on my desk for about a month because there is so much going back to that educator stressor. And it took 2 grade 7-8 teachers to come into my room at different times, and somehow they heard about the book. So the book started gaining some verbal traction, and then I thought, oh, okay, well, if these people are saying something, maybe I should be given a flip to this book. And I started, and then they wanted their own copies, and everyone wanted. So we just naturally, it kind of organically just grew because people started to think, it doesn't matter if you're in year 1, doesn't matter if you're in year 21. You can pick it up and be very reflective about it. And then a book club just kind of formed. And then it was more about, while we did the slideshows and we did the presentation of each of the conditions, our sessions turned more into, I tried this with this student. Have you ever tried this with this student? This student had this issue today. What can I do? And whatever condition we were talking about, it became more, well, because teachers like to talk, it became more of that sharing session about what we did and what we tried. And it was based on it. It was so organic, and that restorative circles that were mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a natural complement to how a school works. It just kind of naturally grows, because sometimes it's not always about curriculum. It's great. But that curriculum, bringing it into how we intentionally work with our students brings the curriculum alive better.
So just to touch on your St. Mark's experience, there was a question earlier on from Jackie who was talking about, how do you work with parents who may be focused on the academics? How do you get them to sort of, without handing them the third path or having them join our YouTube live conversations, how do you get them to sort of understand the importance of well-being in conjunction with the academics, that one is not without the other?
The students that I end up working with are already on the emotional crises. So their parents have been seeing. So if the parent hasn't been picking up, or if the parent is really focused on whatever the math mark is, or math test, not picking on math. And then, but the parent has already seen some of these emotional outbursts or emotional reactions at home, that you can do some really good questioning. And the condition books that you can get as well have some nice reflective questions for teachers, but you can reword them for a parent to say, have you noticed this? Have you seen that? You can go to the sleep question. You can go to the eating question. You can go to the friend question, or have they now started to not be involved in something? And that then it kind of reframes it that, yes, academics is still heavily involved, but we're trying to see what other emotional sources might be there.
So as the teacher, kind of guiding the parent to answer other questions, right? Getting off that subject specific, right? That they can get stuck on, and kind of, talking about the whole picture.
Because they may see stuff at home that we don't, versus we see stuff at school that they don't. So we have to work together and trying those different types of questions, that asking, have you seen, or what is it like when this happens? Because there might be triggers at school.
And I wonder if reading the third path is also a way to empower ourselves with the language around, guiding some of those parent conversations. And you'll see as we explore some of the conditions that there are some really neat concepts and ideas that we can bring back to conversations with parents, conversations with other educators in the building. So I think it just empowers us as educators with knowledge too that we can use in any of our conversations. But I like coming back to the guilt idea, right? That if we feel that we are doing some of these things that promote well-being in our schools and our classrooms, that it's taking away from the academics. But, the goal, and I'm reading it from the bottom of page 21, it's relatively obvious. It's to help young people develop into healthy, well-rounded adults who know themselves and are able to meet life's challenges with a sense of purpose and self-efficacy. And really, that just makes so much sense, I think, to so many of us that we want our students to meet life's challenges and to be able to, go out and have all those soft skills. And I think that thinking about the third path really supports that.
Just to touch on that, another strategy, if there are administrators or teachers who are on parent council, Julie Hanna, the principal of Holy Spirit, actually presented the book and just brought it up to make them aware of it, so that it's, it's that communication, right? It's that they want to be on board just as much as we are. So again, opening it up to parent council and your parent community at large.
So we just have a few minutes left.
That's right. We have a little over 5.
But just to think about the third path and, what is it exactly? I've included a few slides, slide 11, that really, we think about the how. So how curriculum is taught. And so the authors describe the how of the third path involves 2 closely interrelated components. The first describes the general approach to education, one that places relationships at its center. So we have the relationship-based approach. So the authors really bring focus to relationships, and we can't have deep learning without deep relationships. And
those learning partnerships.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And the second outlines the necessary conditions that need to be in place for students to undertake academic achievement. So we're going to explore those 8 conditions, and they have a little description on pages 26 and 27 that I'm sure you've read through. So we will get to all those 8 conditions and see how they really build upon each other. And we'll have some resident experts that come in to chat with us. But one of the last things that I really like, and I've included a good slide on that too, is looking at that chart, the task-based approach versus the relationship-based approach. So having us think beyond the simple, well, yeah, I have relationships in check, like I say hi to my students. And so really looking at, deepening the relationship-based approach and what that actually means. And there's a great chart that Dr. Tranter put together on slide 13 to help us think about some of those relationship-based approaches. And really, it's all about educator introspection, thinking about ourselves, where we're at on this journey, because our students are on the third path, but we are as well. So we're sort of walking along and journeying with them. So taking moments to think about ourselves as well, I think, is important.
There was a really nice point from Kim LaSalle, who was talking about how, as educators, and I know that we have 8 and tippers watching, so that some of this could be really overwhelming when you're first starting out, or if you don't even know how to tread these waters. And so Kim was really talking about how the Special Education and Student Services Department offers a whole slew of resources, and even your school community with your social worker. There must be. So you have,
psychologist,
there we go.
Social worker, there's the cell team, even interdepartmentally, we work really well together to support our students. So really it is a team approach.
Right. And there's people there that can help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially for those students that are struggling and we're just not sure, or, we talk about developing that whole child, but how do we do that within the context of curriculum? Well, there's lots of us here who definitely can support that conversation. So I'm hoping that as you start to read through the conditions, especially those first four, they call them those sort of foundational conditions, to really think about your classroom, your school community, or even where you work, and how some of this learning fits in, and maybe jotting down some questions that you might have for us. And you can feel free to send questions if things are not clear when you're reading, and we can definitely chat about those. But maybe just kind of finishing off with a few thoughts about why call it a path. So if you're looking at the slide deck, it would be slide 12. Just thinking about all of this as a journey with our students, to distinguish it from a strategy or program. So oftentimes people want a program, like, okay, just give me something I can follow. But this is not a program. It's for educator introspection. It's a way to gain knowledge, which is really great. To clarify that what matters most is what you do along the way. So the how. To remind educators they are walking alongside their students. And I really love that, thinking about how we are supporting our students. To focus on building the path, not always measuring the student. And I know we've had a lot of dialogue lately about that. And to encourage educators to ask themselves if they are on the path. So having those check-in moments, and maybe this morning is one of those for you, checking in. Where are you on the path? How are you feeling? And just really excited that you're learning with us, and hopefully you enjoyed your time this morning.
Yeah.
And I
So
think
is there anything?
Manel's question we need to come to on the first, maybe in the next session, because that's a bigger question on performance stress. Maybe we can.
In the classroom.
Yes.
That's a great segue to our next book club number 2. But I know that St. Mark's has done a lot of great things. Is there anything you want to share? Any tips that, like, where schools could start?
Make it organic, make it easy, make it more discussion based. Don't put it as a staff agenda for every staff member to learn and make them think that it's yet another thing. It's as simple as saying, this week or this month, we're going to try greeting students at the door, and we're going to do an exit card at the end of the month and say, do you think it made a difference in your classroom interactions, just greeting people at the door? We're making it simple.
Yeah.
And
approachable.
And of the teachers that have had the Third Path Book Club, they're kind of then lending their books out. So it's just kind of becoming organic.
Yeah.
And we're matching with Immaculata now to build our Hapara workspace, just to share resources.
So I invited Carrie, and because I call her a Third Path champion, because she, got the book and got things rolling at our school. And now we have all kinds of champions out in the system. You guys have your books and you have your knowledge. And so you can go out and be champions and share your learning and your understanding with other people.
Yeah. And just a huge shout out to Leading and Learning, Allison Kinahan, as well as Elizabeth Paquette and her team for purchasing the books. I think it's just really exciting. We were hoping for 7 people to join our book club, and it kind of exploded, which is a really good sign that educators want this and we're willing and we want to learn. So thank you to those 2 individuals who got all of the books for us. We really, really appreciate it. And I guess this is us signing off. We did it.
Yay!
It actually worked.
High five!
And so we look forward to seeing you at our second book club, and I will send an email the week of for a friendly reminder. All right.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Yay!
Good job, ladies.
Drink my coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yay!